Thank you, sir, for giving us such an insightful discussion. Moving on to the industry panel discussion, moving towards lasting sustainability. Industries play a crucial role in shaping the future. This panel discussion will focus on how renewable energy, decarbonization, and technological innovations can drive long term sustainability. We are privileged to have with us Dr. Nitant Mate, Managing Director of Sea Green Technologies and a leading force in renewable energy solutions and sustainable technology. Mr. Mahesh Devdar, Head of PIC Center for Sustainable and Energy, Center for Sustainable Energy and Mobility. With his extensive experience in renewable energy and electrification, he is committed to shaping policies and technologies that drive India's transition to low carbon economy. Mr. Milan Nag, Chairman of KK Nag Private Limited. He is an industrial leader in sustainable business practices, pioneering in eco friendly materials and circular economy solutions in India. His company has been instrumental in reducing industrial carbon footprints by integrating green manufacturing process and energy efficient technologies. We lastly also have Mr. Shantanu Pandit, CII Chair for Climate Change. Mr. Shantanu is an impact driven entrepreneur leading the charge in industrial decarbonization and energy efficiency. As a trusted digitalization partner of Siemens, he focuses on smart energy monitoring, automation, and power optimization, ensuring industry's transition toward a cleaner and more efficient energy system. Moderating this discussion with us, we have Dr. Gurudas Nulkar, a leading voice in industrial sustainability and ecological economists. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me in welcoming these panelists. Thank you.
Good evening once again, and here we are back again. I love that song by Backstreet Boys. So it starts with that, here we are back again. I think this is going to be a very interesting panel discussion because we have a mix of people who are working in the industry, youth who are part of industry, and also Mahesh, as well as Nitant, who have been in industry as well as in policy and thinking. This is what I plan to do. I would request each panelist to start off with their a brief argument for about 3 to 4 minutes, right? And then we will go in for a cross questioning. So it's not just me who's asking the questions, but the others are free to ask each other. So that will give a more of an open kind of thing, right? And I'll start with the youngest of the lot, Shantanu. The mic is for you. 3 minutes.
Hello. Yeah. Good evening. Absolutely, it's after post lunch, so a little energy drop, I guess. But okay, it's industry, so it's more of energy, and definitely we consume a lot of energy. So myself, I'm Shantanu Pandit. Uh, I lead the climate change vertical with CII, and we have a lot of initiatives with YI as a vertical. So one of them is the important and most impactful is green infrastructure, where if an industry is green, definitely we have a lot of decarbonization to be done. And also when I run a company where we do energy efficiency for industries, and we see the approach of industries. So I would really like to highlight the approach of industries where when we go as partners or we go as solution sellers, the approach is very different. They don't want it. Basically, it's a luxury today. But when it comes to sustainability as a topic, and it's a buzzword today, now it's an alarm. Now they want it. So there's something which is called as energy efficiency, where power quality matters. It impacts the power generations as well. So let's work on that. Let's start a dialogue on that where with the industry itself, where the power quality issues are huge. Today, when one industry is consuming power, are they really utilizing those power KWH units efficiently? Definitely no, there's a wastage. And to highlight energy, it's a very fundamental law that it's conversion. So energy cannot be destroyed, it cannot be created. It is a conversion. So energy, which is electricity, is converted to heat, or it's a waste. So can we identify that waste? Yes, we can. There is technology, there are monitoring systems today where we can map these wastages. So I guess that's what I really want to, start with the climate change perspective, because that's a very interesting thing and it has a impact, it has a measure. We can definitely lower it to 20% of that industrial carbon decarbonization. So
Thanks. Thanks for that perspective. Milan?
Good evening, everyone. I represent Kekinag Private Limited, which is a plastic processing company. And we are mainly into foams. So we do thermocol, which is the most vanilla item. We do a close cousin of thermocol, if you will, called expanded polypropylene, which is used for automobile components. And we also do rotational molding, which for the unfamiliar, it's these large hollow plastic items, like Syntex tanks being the most common product that you see in rotational molding in our country. But we do other stuff as well in using that process. So I come from the plastics industry, and then to be at a sustainability conference is almost like a contradiction. Or at least that's what it seems like to most people, because there's so much hysteria about plastics. And therefore, I need your indulgence, Dr. Nulkar. I may take a little bit more than 3 minutes because I need to explain my position. Plastics is now quite a bad word. And even school children are taught that plastics are bad. You have these glamorous actresses who grab these unsuspecting school kids and give them placards and say no to plastics. And but a lot of it stems from ignorance, because one can't just wish away plastics. You encounter them from the moment you wake up in the morning. For example, you pick up the first thing you do is pick up your toothbrush. The handle is made of plastic. The bristles are made of plastic. Your toothpaste tube is made of plastic. You use shampoo. You use the conditioner. The containers are made of plastic. Your soap dispenser, your hairbrush. If you use a razor, if it's disposable, then it's entirely made of plastic. If you use otherwise, the handle is made of plastic. If you use contact lenses, your case is made of plastic. If you use makeup, your makeup container is made of plastic. Your deodorant stick is made of plastic. Even your clothing, there's a lot of spandex and polyester and nylon that goes into clothing these days, and that's all plastic. And you haven't even reached the breakfast table yet. So, you've got plastic galore. You can't escape them. Plastics are ubiquitous. They're, pervasive, omnipresent. They're literally everywhere. But having said all of that, we have to admit that we do have a problem. And there are at least 4 issues with plastics. Firstly, they're generally sourced from non-renewable resources. Secondly, when converting them from raw materials to finished products, energy is used, albeit I would argue that the energy used is less than in for converting many of the competing materials. And there is, of course, like with most manufacturing processes, there would be some adverse impact on air and water, for example. Then generally they're not, that's the third problem, they're generally not biodegradable. And I think this is the issue that has brought this whole no to plastics movement about, because they do not break down and integrate back into nature at the end of their useful lives. But most plastics that we use are what are called thermoplastics. There are 2 types of plastics, thermoplastics and thermosets. Thermosets cannot be recycled, but thermoplastics, which is the vast majority of the normal plastics we use, can be recycled. So they're not meant to be put into landfills. They're meant to be reused and recycled. But that's the 4th problem, that we do not reuse and recycle as much as we should be. So awareness of the importance of sustainability has, of course, been growing in society over the last several years. And that has been happening in our company as well. One of the first things we did was to rewrite our purpose. And it was reworded to say that Kekinag Private Limited is an ethical and innovative leader in the plastics industry, committed to environmental sustainability. When trying to figure out how we could actualize this statement of purpose, we decided that as a smaller company with limited resources, we will concentrate on problems number 2, which I described, which is namely reducing energy consumption and adverse environmental impact during the production process, and problem number 4, which is increasing the recycling of used EPS. We have 6 locations, and in each there were individual efforts that were being made to conserve energy, reduce waste, etc. But the impact was being dissipated as we did not have a focused approach. To give the effort some thrust and coherence, we realized we needed to work in a structured manner and were fortunate to come across CII's GreenCo rating system. GreenCo is the first and only framework available anywhere in the world that evaluates companies on the environmental friendliness of their activities using a life cycle approach. It has 8 modules: energy efficiency, water conservation, renewable energy, greenhouse gases, waste management, material conservation, recycling and recyclability, green supply chain, green infrastructure, and ecology. A factory's track record is evaluated to assess how it has improved in each of these 8 areas over the past 3 years. 5 of our 6 plants were eligible to be rated. The 6th plant couldn't be rated because it was just a year old at that time, and we needed 3 years data to be eligible. And I'm proud to say that of our 5 plants, 3 were awarded gold ratings and 2 got silver ratings. But the ratings per se was not what was important. The biggest benefit we got was with how much more efficient our operations became. Many of our senior managers were aghast at the amount of money we were spending to comply with the requirements of GreenCo. But I can say with certainty that it was all money well spent. Not only did it all pay back within a year, but those savings are now permanent and we'll realize them year after year. Yeah. So happily, GreenCo not only makes good environmental sense, it also makes very good business sense.
Yeah. So if we could take more of this in the later part of it.
Sure.
After the initial part.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
With questions. I think these are very inspiring stories, and stories which say that, you know, these are not expenses which are wasted in you know, something which is going to be useful for the future generations, but this is actually expenditure which is going to be much more, making you much more competitive. Absolutely. Yeah, right. So I think the message is very clear from that. Mahesh, may I request you to go ahead with your initial?
Great. So I'll just take it forward from where Gurudas left. He talked about 2 things. First is the solutions part of it. We also want to talk about solutions. The second aspect is he talked about the critical mineral, role of critical mineral. And he talked about how we have ample land, sun, and the farming practices, which will really help us to be self-sufficient in terms of energy. I want to propose that nuclear is another important aspect from that angle as well. Where we have the indigenous source of technology. Now we have developed that a lot. So I would just want to make a case for nuclear energy, and especially the role of small modular reactor in the industrial sector. So just some brief, brief about nuclear fission. All of us, we know, we all have played carom, right? So we put the striker and the coins kind of get it. This thing, it's very similar. There is a neutron that gets bombarded onto a nucleus of a radioactive atom like uranium-235. It gets broken, the nucleus gets split into 2 components, not unlike the carom board where you have multiple coins going on. There are typically 2 components, barium and krypton, and then there are 3 more neutrons that come out, and they kind of go and hit the other atoms of uranium, and that's how the chain reaction, as we call it, starts, and the nuclear energy gets generated. So while this is all happening, we also need to know that there are a lot of myths and challenges around the way people perceive nuclear energy, and we'll clear some of those in the subsequent discussions. But I also want to make a case that although we are very proud of our scientists and we talk highly about the prowess of our nuclear scientists, but to be very honest, we have not done as good as we would have liked in the last 70 years. Dr. Homi Bhabha presented his 3-stage nuclear cycle back in 58. He actually suggested that we will reach around 8 gigawatt of nuclear generation by 1980. Here we are in 2025, and we are around 7.4 gigawatt in our nuclear, in our overall capacity. If you just put the number, I'm going to share a lot of numbers. It's just 1.7% of our total installed capacity in India. Just in terms of the percentage of nuclear generation, we are 30th in the rank of countries. Forget about China, which started around our same time. They are around 57 gigawatt in nuclear. Even Pakistan, they are having 17% of their energy coming from nuclear sources. So we have lagged a lot. Nothing to do with our scientists. Of course, we had our restrictions when we did our tests, nuclear tests back in 74 and 98. But in spite of that, we as a country have not really lived to the expectation that nuclear as a source gives us, and also what we can do with it. Even countries like UAE, which started their journey around 15 years back, they are around 5.3 gigawatt, and here we are at 7.4 gigawatt. So a lot needs to be done in that space, and lot can be done. Again, from the critical mineral, I just want to add just one more point, and then I'll just stop, and then we'll do a lot of question answer. Hopefully, I'm sure you will have a lot of questions. But in terms of the indigenous sources, so uranium 235, we have natural uranium, very small quantity, we mostly export it. But apart from that, there also we are trying to overcome that challenge of mineral availability by focusing our energy on energy in both sense, but focusing on energy on thorium, which is abundant. We are the topmost reserves of thorium, almost 1 million ton in India. So that is one area that we are focusing. All the technologies now, we have already developed that. We use the pressurized heavy water reactor mostly. We have around 22 reactors operating in India. And then we have mastered that technology. So we are at that stage. Now we can really build on top of this capability that we have. And we really need to take it to the next level. Because again, just few numbers and then I'll close. Currently we are around 1500 to 1600 terawatt hour of electricity needs that we have. Expected to, with our economic growth and rest of the things and the cooling load that's going to go up, it is going to go around 6500 terawatt hour by 2047 when we have our Viksit Bharat dream. And currently our installed capacity is around 440 gigawatt. It is expected to go to around 3500 to 4000 gigawatt. Out of that, even if you look at all the renewable sources, including solar, wind, hydro, we'll not be able to cross more than 1500 to 1700 gigawatts. So it's a huge shortfall that we have, and the low carbon nuclear has to play a key role in that energy landscape of 2047. So I'll just take a pause at this point of time. We'll of course discuss more questions later. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think, these are very important figures we need to look at. Nitant, I think you are also from the power sector and you have worked a lot in that. So if you could give your opening statements, please.
Hi. Okay. So basically, I'm a hardcore mechanical engineer, but I converted to renewable energy in 1987. And since then, I've been working on that. I started as a solar guy working on solar energy. And then now I'm kind of an advocate of everything renewable. So essentially, the only source of energy that we have outside of the earth, which is giving energy to us, is sun. And so any way, any efficient way to harness the sun is the right way of doing things. And that is why when I say that I went to entire solar, that means you talk about bioenergy, it is solar. You talk about wind energy, it is solar. You talk about hydro energy, it is solar. And of course, solar photovoltaic and solar thermal are the known direct forms of solar energy utilization. So the future of energy, as I see in India, is a network of smart microgrids of hybrids of renewable energy. Okay. So basically, decentralized. When Priyadarshini was talking, she talked about decentralized. Renewable energy, solar energy is available in a decentralized manner. And unfortunately, our conventional wisdom after industrialization always has been to centralize everything, make it bigger so that cost per unit goes down. So the idea in renewable energy is work with the smallest possible viable capacity. and then multiply those. Instead of increasing the capacity, you increase the numbers. And that is a very, very good strategy of insurance. So, for example, if I'll give you an example of biodiesel plants. Biodiesel was a buzzword a decade ago, or maybe a couple of decades ago in the world over. And everybody started talking about biodiesel, saying that, look, waste oil, we would be converting that to biodiesel. Waste bio oil, we can convert to biodiesel. And then there were plants, people commissioned plants of like 1 million tons a year. That means 300 tons of biodiesel produced every day. So that means you have to have 300 tons of raw material of waste vegetable oil coming to that factory, and then you convert that, and then you create biodiesel, which is almost close to 300,000 liters. And then you have to sell that 300,000 liters, so you have to transport that biodiesel back to places of consumption. So that is quite stupid. And most of these plants failed for a number of reasons. I will not go into details of that, but that is something that we have to keep in mind. So it is decentralized source. The future of energy is going to be in hybrids of renewable energy microgrids, which are smart, which can import, export energy to the grid next to it, or grids next to it. And that is how it is going to be. Another thing is, this is going to be rural centric, and that is why the money that flows from rural areas, from cities abroad, is actually going to go other way around. From cities, the money is going to go to rural areas. And that is really Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliance, all those things are going to be possible because of that. And renewable energy will have very large component of bioenergy. Because of that, there are a number of ways. Gurudas mentioned that you can get energy from biomass. And one of the ways is to ferment the biomass into biogas. So when you do that, you are actually recycling all the micronutrients and the organic carbon back into the land. So you can use the same piece of land over and over again, really sustainably. And that is the way you would probably be able to do that. Another thing is, when you are looking at energy problem, renewable energy solutions and the hybrid grid solution kind of gives you a possibility of working with energy, food, water, waste, and health, everything put together. So it gives you a possibility of having holistic approach to solve your problems. I'll stop there.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And we have about 24 minutes. That laptop is continuously staring at me when you're answering. So I would like to ask the first set of questions to each one of you, and I would like you to be focused on that answer. So Shantanu, one of the things which I said earlier was increasing the value per use of resource. And that is something which you've been doing all along in CII-YI, which means you're trying to reduce the energy consumption without reducing the output of a factory, right? And that's the way that you plan to improve HVAC, you have to plan to improve the power factors and so on and so forth. So can you tell us something? So it's quite obvious, businesses save money when they save energy, right? So that's a very strong incentive for them to do that. But is there any incentive to go beyond the obvious profitability factor that you have come across?
So in 2018, MSEDCL had a directive straight away in the bill itself, in the month of April, that once you save power factor or you improve power factor to unity, you get an incentive of 7% in the bill. So if it is in the policy itself from the government or from the governmental agencies, industries really act on it. So when we used to approach industries for improving the power factor earlier to the bill, so it was a luxury, they never implemented it. But now since they have incentives, then there was a demand which was for the power factor improvement. And then now today, again, there's a new bill which passed was for the AVH billing. Now you don't know where the power, really is getting wasted or it is getting utilized. So it is a KVH billing which is being done today. So it was done in the month of somewhere around April 2020. Now it's a real challenge for the industries, like how I have to improve my existing efficiency. So when I talk about KVH, I don't really know exactly where my energy is wastage. So So I need to do something which is called as some energy monitoring has to be done. We need to map the energies. We need to see where there is wastage, because again, waste is a waste. It's a national waste. If you are really saving that, then definitely there is an impact back end on the thermal power generation, because we are reliant on that. Solar, okay, so my approach is, rather than going for additional renewables, additional energies, existing energy has to be saved. That's the fundamental. If that is done, then the second step is you go with the renewables, you go with the second source of power. But yeah, incentives, government really has incentives. Now, we also talk about harmonics in the system. The government has started, or the MSCDCL has started getting, notified letters to the industries that now your harmonics levels are high. You need to get it in a lower level and save power, basically. So there are incentives, and the incentive is in the balance sheet directly, because you're saving power and you're saving on the energy. And per kg, if there is some amount of energy which is consumed, some kWh amount of energy is consumed, if you're efficient enough, then your definite per kg output is reduced.
Yeah,
So the energy is reduced.
So that's
That's a tangible.
that's reducing the difference between output and input, so
Absolutely.
which is including value add. So, Milan, one of the things which we heard you very clearly say is that doing good to the planet has also been useful for your business, right? And you did a Green Co rating, CII, and he's also from CII, and you've already talked about how CII has kind of been a transformational agent for Indian industry. And you've been in business for long. KK Nag has been a pioneer in that. Um, would you kind of think about ways where sustainability, I have actually two questions for you. Would you think about ways of sustainability outside your gate, which is a little harder to see and which is directly not going to impact your balance sheet, as a means of improving your competitive advantage? One question. And the second is, would these new norms of EPR, extended producer responsibility, reduce your competitiveness or your profitability?
We actually, the two are related in our case, because what happened was, we plastics were getting a bum rap. EPS was getting a worse reputation than the rest of the plastics, because you found EPS thrown all over the streets and in water bodies and all that sort of stuff. So we started thinking about this maybe 6 or 7 years ago. We had imported many years ago, about 15 or 20 years ago, we had imported some very sophisticated machinery from Denmark when our rejections were very high, to reprocess the rejections and put them back into our process. But then with TQM and all these sorts of moves, our rejections came down to a very, very low level, and these machines were just idling. And so the societal impact, we thought that what we could do is collect all the waste EPS. So we made a pledge that we didn't, in the streets, we didn't want to see any, we called it thermocol because that's what it's known as colloquially. We didn't want to see any thermocol thrown on our streets, rivers, or the garbage dumps of Pune. Yeah, that was the pledge we took. So we tied up with PMC, and we had a tripartite agreement with PMC and Swatch, because initially we were trying to collect it ourselves, and that was just not viable. So then the Swatch workers were collecting all the thermocol from homes, consolidating it at their at every street. They've got a little station, and our trucks were still do a milk run around Pune all through the day, picking up this stuff as it's consolidated everywhere. Then it would come back to our factory. We put it into these machines, recycle it, and shove it back into the product as in place of virgin material. To answer your second question, EPR now mandates from the 1st of April that all EPS packaging products have to have 10% recycled content. Right? Now, most people, when they recycle EPS, most other people, what they were doing was just burning it. Yeah, which is actually downcycling it, because they make it from a expandable polystyrene to GPPS to make all these cheap plastic items. So our process is actually recycling it, and we've been doing it for years. So for us, it's actually going to be quite easy to meet these EPR norms. And I think, did you ask about the economic aspect of it? Yeah. So there are two aspects. Obviously, there's a cost of collecting the EPS from somewhere and then reprocessing it, and then there's a saving because you're saving on virgin material to that extent. So you've just got to do it right. You've got to get the economics right and make sure that your costs are less than your saving.
So I think we have both the examples of what I talked before. One is, how do you increase the value per use, and what he talked about, how do you increase the number of times you're using the same resource. So both examples sitting here, and thanks so much. I think, and this is what you just said is a great example of going sustainability beyond your gate. You tied up with Swatch, with PMC, you had no business to do that, right? But that was going to affect your critical raw material, and that's how you came. So thanks for that. Before I come to Mahesh, I want to go to Nitant first, because Nitant will set the context for what Mahesh has to say. Nitant, and you have devised a very good scheme of, before even Atmanirbhar was a buzzword, you had talked about how a village can be Atmanirbhar in terms of energy and water through a decentralized model. Can you explain that, and how is it really practical, or is it just a conceptual model?
Actually, everything starts as a dream. Okay, so when you start talking about it, it's like everybody would say he's a dreamer. So, for example, if I were to dream, I will start saying that, look, every village in India can be a net energy exporter and net exporter of food and net exporter of fertilizer. And this is possible because the kind of natural resource we have. Solar energy available in India is on an average about 5.5 kilowatt hours per square meter per day. Okay, so if you look at it that way, then the amount of solar energy you get in a day on India is enough to support India for next 7.5 years. Okay, so there is no dearth of energy. Now the problem is how we can manage that. Second aspect, when it comes to biofuels, it is very important that you convert that solar energy through photosynthesis into some biomass, so capture that carbon dioxide and water. So carbon dioxide, there is plenty. I mean, we are talking about that to be a problem. So that is not our problem. Do we have enough water? Now, average is a very funny number, but I'm going to talk about average. So average rainfall on land of India is about 1050 millimeters, more than 1 meter. 3.28 million square kilometers is our land area. So if you do some back of the envelope calculations and say that, look, that much rain falls, we are not able to manage that. Maybe 50% of that water is going to go, rest 50% of water, we can allow it to seep, allow it to be in small dams, check dams, whatever, and we are able to use that. So if you do that, you can have 3 crop cycles. On the entire cultivable land of India, which is about 70% of India's area, you were talking about fallow lands and bringing them back to photosynthesis. This is absolutely possible. Numbers, these are engineers' numbers, not farmers' numbers. Okay, so numbers can very clearly say that it is possible. Now, so if you do that, then there is enough availability of sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide. So enough availability of biomass is possible. So every crop that you have, grain, so about 260, 300 million tons is what we produce in terms of grain every year. Now, if you look at that grain production, if you have maize, then every kilogram of maize that you get, you have 2 kilograms of plant. So if you are wheat, every kilogram of wheat you have 1 kilogram of plant. Rice is same. Sorghum, it's again 1:2. So there is enough biomass available as waste from the farming itself. But if you decide to cultivate, then you can cultivate varieties like Napier grass, which is absolutely possible. I mean, people talk about any random numbers, but to be realistic, about 300 tons of fresh biomass per acre per year is possible. Okay, 400 tons is the theoretical limit for the type of grass that we are talking about. And 300 tons of fresh biomass is wet biomass. So if it is dry biomass, it is like 25% for the back of the envelope calculations. 27, 28% solids is what it has, but 300 tons will give you 75 tons of biomass. Now, how does it compare with farming biomass? If you are talking about, say, if you are talking about a crop that is going to give you more biomass, like maize, then you will probably get about 4 tons of dry biomass per year from a maize crop. Okay. But that same acre will give you about 75 tons. So if you are trying to maximize energy availability, then you are able to do that with this. Now I'm going to cut short and give you the answer of what you are looking at. So basically it is possible that you can cultivate and create biomass and then convert that biomass to energy. Now different routes are there. One of the routes of converting biomass to energy would be biogas. And when you are doing biogas, the gas comes out and the slurry also comes out. So when the slurry comes out, it gives you fertilizer. So you are giving it back to the ground. Now that is one way. So that way you are saving actually import of chemical fertilizers. Okay, so that is economically definitely a good activity. Also giving the micronutrients back. Now second is energy. Now if you go biogas route, then you have possibility of using the gas as fuel for cooking, for industrial heating and things like that. And you also are able to convert that gas into electricity through the generator, which is these are all proven processes. Okay, so that's not a problem. Now, third thing is, so basically you want electricity for the village and you want electricity, excess electricity that can be sold. So that is possible, depending on the sizing is the most important thing. Now, the third aspect is, what is the mix of electricity generation? So there is solar availability, so you can have solar photovoltaic. And then you have biogas. So what will you do? So ideally, I would go maximize on biogas, okay? Because the availability of raw materials that you were talking about, solar cells, that is one thing. And second, when I am operating a generator, it's a very conventional technology, but there is waste heat available. So the waste heat can be also used as process heat, and waste heat also can be used as an effective thing for generating cooling. Because cooling is a very important thing. In India, there is a problem that farm produce is not processed or not stored at the farm gate. And if that happens, about 40% of our farm produce actually goes waste.
Yeah, okay. So for want of time, I'm going to stop you there. Thanks for that. And also the other point that you always say that for storing gas, you don't need any critical minerals like you need to store energy, electricity, battery. But coming to Mahesh, and Mahesh, I'm just taking up from where Nitant left off. For Nitant, we talked about Atmanirbhar Village, and you've been a great advocate of using smart grids as a means of reducing electricity demand, right? And you've been talking about how smart grids can be used in institutional campuses or residential colonies and things like that. What exactly is the concept behind that, and what do you think would be the cumulative effect on, let's say, a city like Pune, if more housing societies come up with smart grids?
Sure. So I think smart grid is a technology which basically, it's not just one monolithic technology. It's a collection of multiple different technologies working closely together. And that's how it works. Just going back to Nitant's point, the distributed energy sources is the need of the hour. And nuclear, by the way, the small modular reactor is also one way of distributed energy generation, especially for the industrial areas where it's not just the electricity, but also the process heat that they need at different levels. So small modular reactor provides you the electricity as well as the heat. That can be one generation component into microgrid. Now, microgrid contains all these generation components, whether it's a nuclear small modular reactor, whether it's a solar, whether it's wind, biogas. So these are all generation, components. There are also different, storage components, because especially if you are using energy like solar and wind, these are intermittent sources. So you got to store it, because you can't, in industry or in a housing society, you can't say now it's the evening and I don't have enough energy. Storage is important. One more important aspect that we talked about, efficiency is one area, but the other is we are always looking at energy, from the supply side. There is a huge potential from demand side. We have to manage our demand well. We have to, so gone are the days when we used to have certain demand, and to fulfill that demand, we used to create the source. So it is always generation used to follow demand. Now it's the other way around. Now we have generation sources solar, wind, how do we manage our demand in line with the generation? So now demand has to follow. So demand management services, there is a thing called demand response. These are all important components of new energy equation. Now these are all different things, and as Nitant was rightly pointing out, the controller. Now these are all different sources of energy. How do you control across all these different sources? When the solar energy is at its peak during the daytime, can you store a part of it in the storage device? Can you use that later in the day? Can you cut down your demand? Critical demand will have to continue, but in industry also there might be some non-critical demand. Can you cut it down later in the evening so that your demand matches the supply? So the smart
Time of
microgrid is
Time of it,
essentially
yeah.
absolutely. It's essentially working across all these different sources, coordinate across all these different sources, and then do a job which the traditional grids used to do. And the traditional grids have their huge challenges. We always talk about the distributed sources.
And also talk to the next grid.
Next
and
grid,
that's
yeah.
also very important.
And transmission losses, the distribution losses, there are huge challenges with the traditional grid. So these are the smart grids which are coming up, where it's a smart grid of that for that particular consumption. All these different sources coordinate and work with each other. They talk to other smart grids, and together then they service the requirement, the energy requirement that we have. So that's the concept that we
Yeah,
have.
thanks. I think that's interesting. We have exactly 6 minutes left, and like I promised, I would like to open the panelists to ask questions to each other if you have. That would be an interesting thing to look at each other's perspectives. So first you get to ask each other questions if you have. Otherwise, we'll go to the audience.
I think from my perspective, I think there are a lot of misconceptions about overall nuclear, SMR, and things like that. So if any of you have any, because there is radiation and nuclear waste, and wo kaise manage karenge? And we
Not
have
in
all-
my backyard.
We have all not in my NIMBY, not in my backyard, as they say. Simpsons, right? We have all seen Simpsons.
Yeah.
And we see that green ooze that comes out from the trees, and we say, "Arey yaar, kaise hone wala hai?" So there are a lot of misconceptions. So any of you have any misconception, more than happy to discuss
So
right
actually-
now, even later on as well.
Actually, you have asked the question, so answer it.
Yeah, so radiation is not an issue. I just want to highlight that there is an excellent book by an Indian nuclear scientist called Dr. Arun Nayak. If you are worried about radiation, please pick it up, please read through it. The radiations that we have in around nuclear,
Right now.
absolutely right now, everything, even bananas, there is potassium which is radioactive, of course in very minute quantity, but radioactivity is all around us. The dosage of radiation is what we are worried about. Even outside the nuclear plants, the dosage, there is a unit called sievert. It's the unit which says how much is the biological impact on the human cells. It's found that it is really negligible, around 2 to 3 millisievert. Sievert is a big unit, millisievert. The radiation CT scan के लिए हम लोग गए अपने regular checkup के लिए we have 15 to 20 millisievert that we can. So I think
X-rays.
radiation is not that a
X-rays also,
challenge.
X-rays
X-rays,
also.
absolutely. X-rays, CT scans, all these are radiation. Even the watches sometimes we have this, radiation is everywhere. Of course, how do we manage and how do we avoid the accidents? Completely understood. But it is manageable risk, and we should work towards that. So I just wanted
Right.
to.
And I think Professor Malik has been a big proponent of small nuclear reactors. That's
I have a question
Yeah.
from
Santanu.
Mr. Mahesh. So basically, it's a very unorganized question. It's a very so nuclear generation has energy as well as heat, right? In industry, 40% of the energy is utilized for heat, 60% is utilized for its cooling. So when we say heat, how can it be utilized? Or what is the utilization factor? And
So the way it works is basically, after the nuclear reaction happens, basically that water gets, it's a steam turbine, standard, technology. That steam gets generated, the steam gets used. The steam typically gets condensed again, and it is again used. It's a closed loop cycle. So the idea is that heat that gets generated, especially for low heat applications, which is around 400 degree Celsius. These are all low heat applications, including the desalination and things like that. So that's where what essentially you do is, again, the waste heat that you have. After you run your turbine, the steam is used to run the turbine. You collect that heat, you use it, you transfer it to wherever you want, and you use it. And that's the whole idea of using SMRs for industrial applications. So nuclear generation, the workhorses are like 1.6 gigawatt reactor, 1 gigawatt reactor. But the small modular reactor are 300, 200, 300 megawatt. So for an industry, it's an ideal, source where you use the electricity, use that waste heat, and use it to your, manage your processes. So that's the idea there.
That's a good hope.
Ac-
Amit
actually-
is standing there with a question in his hand. So, Amit, go ahead.
First question for Mahesh. It's we've got a requirement of about 1,000 gigawatt, I think, with the future projections. Right now, we produce about 440 gigawatt or 500 gigawatt. 70% of that is coal. If you want to replace that with nuclear, and I know the technology exists, even if it's terawave power or whatever you want to replace it with, have you figured out the cost implication of maybe replacing 500 gigawatt with nuclear? Have you considered geothermal as an option for repurposing 70% of what we're sourcing from coal into geothermal? Have these cost economics been considered? And if they are considered, are there projections as to when we can get this up and running? One question for Nitant. I used your data which you gave up in the 2019 PIC report, where you figured out Pune's baseline emissions at about 2.6 crore emission tons. I think you figured out that it was about 3 crore emission tons by 2025. I don't know if you guys have run the math backward, but are you still sticking true to those numbers, or how does that work? One question for Milan. Pune has about 2,500 tons of trash it produces every day. 500 tons out of that is plastic every single day. Have you done any math in terms of figuring out even if you can repurpose 100 tons out of that every day with Kekenag? Maybe start with 10 tons, go up to 100, scale it up till we maybe take the renewables out of the system. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I don't think we have enough time. It's just 36 seconds for the three of you to answer, which is impossible. So I would suggest, Amit, that we will take the questions, and they need answers, but we will talk to you individually, because not everybody might be interested in answering that. So let's take them up offline in that, right? And I think it's exactly 60 seconds, which is a good time for me to say thank you to all four of you. You get about 4 seconds of thank you from me. And this has been a good panel. I believe the audience is also enriched by your experience. Thank you so much.
I would like to add something to this. Since we are talking about climate change and the impacts, so with CII-YI as an initiative as green infrastructure, so we came across this Nakshatra one. Okay, so planting 27 trees in 2,000 square feet of land. So let's, we have people, I have the audience, I have such esteemed panelists, and so if we can promote this, it's just planting trees, and if you are able to contribute it towards the greener tomorrow, then please, it's my request to everyone to plant 27 trees and call it a Nakshatra one. It has a spiritual backup to it as well, so people will definitely take care of the trees. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
I'd request our Director PIC, Major General Nitin Gadkari, to kindly provide the panelists with a token of appreciation.
Excellent.